I'll be straight up honest with you guys right from the beginning. The past couple days that I've been reading Camilla's supports have left me pretty conflicted. If I tried to make a top 5 Camilla supports video that purely talked about what I enjoyed about them and how they compared with one another like I did last time, I don't think that video would be very enthusiastic or positive. The reason I say this is because Camilla doesn't have a lot of standout supports, and her best ones, at least to me, aren't great. They're just better than the others. It left me at a bit of a loss for this video. How am I supposed to make a top list for Camilla if I can't even appreciate Camilla? How come Camilla's supports aren't good to me? Why aren't they good? And then it got me thinking, maybe instead of trying to categorize these supports, I should ask a much more intriguing question. Why in her supports does Camilla act the way she acts? And why does Camilla do the things she does? In other words, what's wrong with this woman? In this video, I'm going to try to dissect Camilla and figure out who she really is and what's wrong with her, and why she's a bad character, and in that process, answer those above questions. So let's start with the easiest thing. Who is Camilla? Well, she's Garen's daughter, but her, Xander's, Leo's, and Elise's mothers were all different. This encouraged Camilla's mom to turn her into a pawn, with mom consistently trying to power play with her into Garen's favor. This neglection of motherhood was, by definition, a traumatic event for Camilla. But that's just the start of how Camilla came to be the overly doting sibling I understand her as. I also know from the get-go of the main campaign, and her supports with Arthur, Jacob, Ryoma, and Silas, as well as Corin himself, that Camilla is dangerously obsessed with Corin. The interesting thing about Camilla's love for Corin is that we never really get an explicit reason as to why she loves him so much. We are told in Silas's supports that she wanted to tell Corin she loved him all the time because Corin was mad at her because he thought Camilla purposely didn't give him cookies out of hatred for him. Also, we're told in Niles' support that she wanted to love Corin because of his rough past. But that is only scratching the surface as well. It's not just Corin she's obsessed with, no. Corin is just part of Camilla's mother complex, which, according to psychology, is a collective image of nourishment and security on the one hand, and devouring possessiveness on the other. Sound familiar? As this video will explain, this complex may seem to be derived from Corin's beginnings, but as I will explain, has been mutated over time into a mental illness by not only Corin's situation, but her understanding of her role as defined by the actions that the rest of her family takes. Let's keep our focus on Corin for now though, before we dig into the siblings part in this. Corin is a foster child, a child being forced to live away from his mother, Mikoto, in Hoshido, and forced to live in the northern fortress, away from his adoptive father, Garen, with only his servants at his company. In other words, Corin doesn't have parents. He doesn't remember who Mikoto even is. So given that Camilla had a neglected childhood born from a mother who mistreated her and used her as a political tool, before treating her like how a daughter ought to be treated, she sees Corin as she saw herself, a motherless child. Combined both with her neglect and young Corin's parentless upbringing, she inserts herself as Corin's mother, in hopes that she can provide for him in a way she wasn't provided for. It should be mentioned as well that Camilla's mother complex doesn't permeate as much onto Xander, Leo, and Elise when compared to Corin. Here's why. First of all 3 of Camilla's siblings were at least partially raised under Garen before he was possessed. Leo, while perhaps neglected by his mother, still had Xander to look up to, and Elise had Camilla to depend on already. That leaves just Corin, who both literally and figuratively has nothing. No siblings like Elise had to look up to, and no normal Garen to be raised by. This was telling, at least for Camilla, that she needed to fill that void, but somehow it spiraled out of control, developing from an internal order to separate herself from her mother, to ironically mutating into some kind of mental disorder. In fact, if we knew more about Camilla's past, my suspicions that she actually has separation anxiety disorder could be validated. Now, I could be stretching it, but a cursory glance at the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, Edition 5, or simply DSM-5, specifically the section describing separation anxiety disorder, is described as the following. Excessive fear or anxiety concerning separation from home or attachment figures. According to the DSM-5, in order for this to be a legit diagnosis, the individual in question needs to pass a handful of checkboxes. I won't go into detail about what all of them are, but I'll list the ones I think Camilla can check off. Criterion A. Number 1. Recurrent excessive distress when anticipating or experiencing separation from home or from major attachment figures. Number 2. Persistent and excessive worry about losing major attachment figures or about possible harm to them, such as illness, injury, disasters, or death. Number 3. Persistent and excessive worry about experiencing an untoward event. For example, getting lost, being kidnapped, having an accident, or becoming ill that causes separation from a major attachment figure. Criteria B through D. B. The fear, anxiety, or avoidance is persistent, lasting at least 4 weeks in children and adolescents and typically 6 months or more in adults. C. The disturbance causes clinically significant distress or impairment in social, academic, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. And D. The disturbance is not better explained by another mental disorder. Does Camilla fit any of these criteria? Because it's not explicitly said, I'm just using speculation here, so take it for what you will. But these could fit, because it seems like when Camilla was away from Corrin and Birthright, the outburst she had against the Hoshidans in chapter 13 seemed to indicate that being separated was something that Camilla dwelled on for a long time. And out of the siblings, Camilla does seem to put Corrin's safety as more of a priority than most things. She abandons her missions and conquests in chapter 10 and instead burdens Leo and Xander with them in order for Camilla to help Corrin. More generally though, excessive worrying about Corrin just seems like something Camilla would do off screen. Criteria B and C both have potential too, but it can't really be proved since if this were to transpire, it would have been off screen in Birthright. But I'd like to think that when Corrin left, Camilla's mental state wasn't the same. And D seems to fit, since the prospect of losing major attachment figures in her life, be it Corrin, her retainers, or her lovers, she's a pretty normal person. Additionally, the DSM-5 mentions some separation anxiety disorder development factors. Separation anxiety disorder often develops after life stress, parental divorce, a disaster that involved periods of separation from attachment figures. In adults, other examples of life stress include leaving the parental home, entering a romantic relationship, and becoming a parent. Parental overprotection and intrusiveness may be associated with separation anxiety disorder. Now look, I know I'm taking these criteria at face value, and I'm definitely not a psychiatrist. Heck, I'm graduating this year with a sociology major and a French minor. But I feel like if we knew more about Camilla's relationship with her mother, or more about her childhood relationship with Corrin and her siblings, or just more profoundly impactful things that happened to Camilla that happened to affect her mental state, I think my suspicions that she actually has separation anxiety disorder would even be more validated. For now, it's just a theory I have. But even if I'm wrong, and even I'm way off base with this, Camilla still does not deal with change or separation well, at all. Anyways, I have the PDF of the DSM-5 linked below. If you want to draw your own conclusion whether she has separation anxiety disorder or not, go to page 189. Her siblings also play a part in why Camilla believes that her job is to be the loving mother of the family, which could be a contributing factor as to her fragile mental state. Consider the topics of her support conversations with Xander, Leo, and Elise. With Xander, the topic is both of their roles in the family, with Xander explaining why he needs to separate himself from his siblings because of his duty as the crown prince. Consider this line in their A support. I must maintain a certain distance, even from my family. You seem to be ably handling our siblings' affairs, so I'll leave that to you. Not only does he validate the notion of family roles, he also validates Camilla's role especially, affirming that Camilla's job in the family is to be the doting older sister they can come to with their troubles. Leo's support also discusses his own place in the family. Camilla shows Leo that his place in the family is being the genius with limitless potential whose ability and capability is vital to their lives. And again, she reaffirms that her role is to be the doting older sister, which Leo does not object to. With Elise, Camilla explains to her that her role in the family is to be the innocent young light that Nor fights for. Elise is the personification of the goodness that Norians need to protect. In all of her supports with her siblings, the focus is on roles, and in each one, Camilla has a perfect understanding of what her siblings are capable of and how they fit into this family. More importantly, she solidifies her role once more as the wise older sister, with infinite love to give, who can listen well and dish out advice to the family when need be. This is her reality. This is what she is happy with. This is what she wants to protect. Most importantly though, this is what makes her secure. And what makes her insecure? The threat of losing that stability, the threat of her role being questioned, and the threat of her love being rejected. This is when the brutal side of Camilla comes out. The reason why Camilla is described as caring and nurturing to her allies, yet vicious to her enemies, is because those enemies not only threaten who she loves, but it also threatens how she understands herself. This anxiety that Camilla has is not only threatened in the main campaign, specifically in Birthright, but it's also present in the way she behaves in her supports with potential lovers, particularly with Laszlo and Selena, but I'll cover this later. I'll be honest with you right now, her best support is probably Kaze because of how interested she is with him. It's interesting to see that Camilla isn't driven to marry someone because of their mutual love of Corrin. Not only is she interested in Kaze for his genuine kindness to Camilla's company, good looks, and taste in tea, there's something else about Kaze, something much more important to her. What makes Camilla want Kaze the most is his default setting to be a morally upstanding man, through his willingness to help Norians even as a Hoshiden himself. It's his earnestness, loyalty, honor, and kindness, everything Camilla ever wished for. Her attraction to Benny is a similar case as well. Camilla is attracted to Benny because he's one of the strongest warriors in the army. He's a guy who could believably have a boxing match with a full-grown bear and come out victorious. He's also pretty lonely, which Camilla makes light of in their A support. What makes these two supports work for Camilla is that not only are they not about Corrin at all, it also isn't about Camilla's possessiveness over people. It's about her falling for the men that reinforce her security. Not only can these two men protect Camilla physically, but it's their loyalty to her, their earnestness to her, that makes Camilla be certain that her world and her image of herself won't be shattered or disillusioned. Their actions, so it seems, will never be at odds with Camilla's absolute need for stability. Similar things can be said about Silas's and Arthur's relationship with her too. While both of these supports started with Camilla's obsession over Corrin, they follow a similar structure. Her messages to Corrin fail to be reciprocated back to her. She gets mad, indicating that she's not doing a good enough job caring for Corrin, that something must be wrong with her, and the solution is tossing in more love. They both end with Camilla marrying with them because it's their loyalty and earnestness that can reinforce her security, with the threat of losing Corrin not being there. All these instances, Kaze and Benny, Silas and Arthur, and hell, even Ryoma, all protect Camilla's world and understanding of herself. A world surrounded by people of integrity, kindness, loyalty, and earnestness. The thought of, what if these men betrayed me or threatened my way of life, won't even be an afterthought. No, it won't even exist. Contrastingly, Selena's, Laszlo, and to a certain extent Jacob's support reveals something else, something darker. Let's start with Jacob. In the C support, Camilla gets in Jacob's face and demands that he stops his service to Corrin. Because she thinks that it's Jacob's game to have Corrin all to himself, she aggressively and threateningly tells him that it's time for him to go, to which Jacob refuses. In B, again, Camilla tries to threateningly push Jacob out of Corrin's life. She tells him that if he cared about Corrin, that he'd know that what he needs is his big sister. Then she straight up yells at Jacob and commands him to listen to her, which Jacob again refuses to. Now here's where things seemingly start to get better for Camilla. In A, she approaches Jacob and apologizes to him, and they both agree that protecting the Avatar is what's most important. Corrin's affection and time shouldn't be a competition between the two. And then in S, it takes a backwards turn. They proclaim their love to one another, but they also agree that should the situation arise, either must sacrifice themselves for Corrin. Then Camilla drops this bomb. I would protect Avatar, even at the cost of your life. It's genuinely hard for me to tell if Jacob and Camilla's love for one another is genuine like it was with Benny or Kaze. It's hard to imagine what Camilla is really thinking here. Would she ever kill Jacob if he got too close to Corrin? It could be a huge stretch, but the fact that it's Corrin that binds them together, and the fact that she says that line without any hesitation, makes me wonder how much she really loves Jacob. Now consider the dark undertones in Laszlo's support chain. In B, after Laszlo mentions Camilla's enjoyment in slaughtering her enemies, then questions her if she would hesitate to kill people she knew, Camilla insults Laszlo for having a soft heart. Now while she doesn't explicitly say no, I think she would. See what I mean? In A, Camilla is curious as to where Laszlo even comes from, and upon hearing his answers of being from a faraway land, she questions how loyal to Nor he really is. Why remain here, she asks, but even the answer she gets doesn't really convince her of her trust in Laszlo's word yet. In S, Camilla gets livid at Laszlo's marriage proposal because she thinks he's being flirtatious, but he reconfirms his feelings. And while Camilla decides that she needs to accept Laszlo's flirtatious antics as part of the Laszlo package, she makes one thing very, very clear. If Camilla has even a doubt that Laszlo is unfaithful to her, she will punish him. As long as Camilla is priority number one, Laszlo will remain safe. Of course, I understand that she could be kidding, but there is truth to her words. If Laszlo betrays her trust or even puts it into question, that's a huge red flag for Camilla, and she will respond violently to get her way and bring order back to her life. The overly protective and possessive behavior of Camilla definitely translates onto people outside of the family. If you still aren't convinced, then let's move on to the Awakening trio and how our royal siblings deal with the idea of separation. Odin's support with Leo, Laszlo's support with Xander, and Selena's support with Camilla cover the topic of what would happen, hypothetically, if they had to leave Nor. This topic shows up in Leo and Odin's A support, where Leo tells Odin that he wouldn't know what he'd do if he lost him, even if after peace were restored to the world. This prompts Odin to ask an important question. Suppose he was to vanish after the fighting was over. Would Leo take up a new retainer? Leo says that he would, but tells him that there aren't many like Odin himself, He'd think it would be much harder to go on without him, and even Leo's future victories would feel hollow because Odin wouldn't be there with him. Should Odin vanish, Leo would always remember him as not only a fantastic retainer, but a good friend. It's a heartwarming support, with Odin and Leo solidifying their friendship to not get lost to time and circumstance. The topic of Laszlo leaving Xander comes up in their A support, just like the above pair. In context, Xander had just mentioned that he lost 2 of his former retainers because Xander himself was too weak to protect them. Xander pleads for Laszlo to stay vigilant to his job as a retainer and not to get himself into trouble to the point where Xander can't save him because he wasn't strong enough. This prompts Laszlo to ask, what if, after the war, he would vanish, never to be seen again? He asks him if he'd be angry, and if he'd ever forgive him for abandoning him. Xander tells him that the only thing that matters to him is that Laszlo stays alive. I wish you only the best in what you choose to do with your life, and come what may, I will never forget you. Here, just like Leo and Odin, we understand that should the retainers leave, it would suck for both Leo and Xander, but what would get them through it is the understanding of how deep their friendship is. They are both sobering and heartfelt conversations. One shows a more grounded side of Odin, a more friendly side of Leo. The other shows a more sobered side of Laszlo, and a more vulnerable and humane side of Xander. But you want to know what happens with Camilla and Selena? Nothing like that at all. Not even close. Right from the C support, Camilla's possessiveness gets spotlighted. On the topic of Selena asking if she's Camilla's favorite retainer, she answers that all of her retainers are precious to her. But she tells her that Selena is so precious to her that she would slay her herself rather than let her leave her service. So right from the beginning, Camilla outright indicates that Selena leaving her is not going to happen. It wouldn't be a bitter pill to swallow like the other 2 supports, because the pill wouldn't even be there in the first place. But maybe Camilla was really just messing around, right? She probably wouldn't kill Selena if she outright left, right? Because it's not like she does something similar in Birthright to Corrin or anything. In support B, a similar topic of how Selena, like Odin and Laszlo in their respective support conversations, even appeared in Nor in the first place. Selena questioned why Camilla liked Selena, and Camilla confesses that she has a weakness for lovely girls, and that's what warmed her up quickly to her. Additionally, however, was her devotion to her that she appreciated. This line is important. Now pay attention to Camilla's word choice from here on. Camilla considers herself lucky to have such a powerful and obedient retainer. And then the topic of the hypothetical situation where Selena would have to leave comes up. Camilla would dread the thought, but would also consider cutting off her legs so she couldn't leave her. She then jokingly asks Selena if she thinks she would actually do that to her, and then refers to her as her adorable little girl. This conversation, as you would expect, ends awkwardly. Notice how possessive Camilla is here. Things like Selena's devotion, her obedience to Camilla are all brought to light here. She even calls her my adorable little girl. And that ending though. Look, in real life, if your friend said that they would consider severing your limbs in order for you to stay, even as a joke, wouldn't that be fucked up? Yes, it would be. It's a really fucked up thing to say. Not only does it leave this conversation awkward, but it's really creepy. Support A doesn't get much better, and Camilla's possessiveness dials up even more. Camilla tells Selena that she's hers and hers alone. She then mentions that she was actually dwelling on the fact that Selena appeared, and was saddened that she could somehow disappear in a similar way. Then Camilla, dwelling on these fears, drops this beautiful gem. Never forget, I am the only home you have. Again, it's creepy, and unlike the other 2 Awakener support conversations, they don't have a heart-to-heart at all. Unlike Odin and Laszlo, Selena isn't any better for the support, and unlike Leo and Xander, Camilla isn't any better for it. It's so much different, and it begs the question, why does this support play out so differently than the others? To put it simply, unlike Camilla, Leo and Xander aren't incapable of dealing with change or separation. They aren't mentally damaged to a point where this universally difficult theoretical situation, for them, is so hard that they can't manage it. Think of the overarching theme of the Awakener Royal conversation. Separation. Notice how possessive Camilla becomes here. Notice how, when Camilla's absolute need for people to be earnest, loyal, and dependable, when her absolute need for people to secure her understanding of herself becomes threatened, she gets violent? She threatens Laszlo's safety if he shows disloyalty. She threatens Selena's safety because, in Camilla's interpretation, and in Camilla's world, Selena is entertaining the thought of abandoning her. And yeah, maybe she wouldn't literally cut Selena's legs off, but remember when Camilla said this in Birthright?
I love you too much to let you go on.
I love you, Corrin, but if you survive long enough to make it all the way up here, I will do what I must to pierce your body with my blade, and then cradle you in my arms, just as I did when you were a child. Implication? She would rather maim Corrin herself and have her suffer in her arms, so long as Corrin would be hers again. And then who knows what would happen next? Would she imprison Corrin? Would she kill Corrin if she had to, in order to make sure Corrin would never leave her again? So is torment really out of the question for people in her life? Like Laszlo asked? I'm gonna say no here. And look, Camilla is a naturally a nice and caring person. She wants to help others. Despite her regal stature, she's still willing to donate her time to those beneath her. She genuinely loves her biological siblings, and she wants to see them thrive. Heck, she doesn't even want to torture Niles when he asks for it. No, she'll only dish out the pain when people wrong her. Indeed, it's only when her values are being contended with. It's only when the roles she had to adopt for herself as the caregiver gets threatened. It's only when she's faced with disloyalty, unfaithfulness, unearnestness, if you will, when she shuts down, becomes extremely defensive, and if need be, becomes brutally violent when she doesn't get her way. Corrin, while a piece in this, is a huge one, and easily is the most important for Camilla. Corrin's contention with staying in Nor is a loss of loyalty being contended with, and if that's gone, what does Camilla really have left? Who is Camilla when the love letters to him failed to deliver her affection? When the sweet nothings whispered by Arthur on her behalf seemed to have no effect? When her lovers threatened the balance of her life by showing even an ounce of distrust? For Camilla, it seems to be life-destroying. We know what she's capable of. Should the event where the need to rebalance the way things were to happen, who knows how far she would go with Jacob, Laszlo, or Selena. And her willingness to get hyper-defensive and willingness to shut down so easily is why I believe Camilla's supports aren't good. At least from my standards. There are no supports she have where we see another character be a foil for her. She never feels like she went from point A to point B. And honestly, she shouldn't develop. You can't cure crazy in 4 conversations. And given everything I just covered, I personally think it would be uncharacteristic of her to develop into a better character. It's weird, but kind of impressive at the same time. Camilla stays stagnant because being faced with conflict means she has to develop out of it. But the thing with Camilla is that she can't deal with change. She'd rather shut down and solve her problems by getting rid of them. Even in the end of Birthright, Camilla, now crown princess of a destroyed family and country, drops most of her royal responsibilities and hands the keys over to Leo. Anyways, is Camilla's developmental issues as a character for the best? At this point, I don't really have a clue. Camilla is a dark character. Probably one of the most seriously dark characters in Western Fire Emblem since Valter or Orson. So on one hand, her supports leave a lot to be desired, yet on the other hand, she behaves perfectly like she should. She loves people who express the qualities that she needs in a person, or she loves her lovers because they also love Corrin. But she's threatened by things that threaten her place in the world, and the prospect of separation of not just Corrin, but her lovely retainers and her lovers themselves is something that Camilla will violently defend herself against by outing them entirely out of existence. In the beginning, Camilla started as a political tool by her mother, developed a need to act motherly in ways that her real mother never did, was encouraged to act this way because it was reinforced by the family structure she ended up being in, and she wholly embraced her role for Corrin, whom she saw herself in. And over time, for one reason or another, it mutated into a mental disorder. Well, that's all I have to say about Camilla, guys. I tried to list off her supports like I did before, but nothing of what Camilla does really fits my criteria on what makes supports stand out. So the entire purpose of this video wasn't to explain why I didn't like her supports, it's to explain why her supports are the way they are, and how it shapes Camilla into being a character who, by design, doesn't have good supports. And even after all of this, even if, by some weird chance that I was actually right and her supports are intentionally designed to not be good, rather than just being shittily written by the writers, do I like Camilla for it? Honestly, no, I don't. Her supports aren't interesting, they aren't good, and everything I've covered in this video are just patterns in her behavior. In other words, they were always there. After doing this video, I wasn't compelled to think of Camilla any differently in a positive light. She's a pretty shallow and boring character in my opinion, who gets shafted pretty hard in Conquest, and is made out to be this crazy person in Birthright. So, After all this, let me know what you think of Camilla. Do you agree with me that she might actually have a mental disorder? Or if you like this video, please leave a like and comment. And if you like this series, please subscribe for more. I'm not going to tell you guys what I'm going to do next week, but I think it might have to do with sacred stones. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching and I'll catch you in the next one. Deuces.